Good evening. My name is Alexei, and this is my audience for tonight. And before I begin, I'd like to show you some images, which is chocolate, electronics, rubber, come on, diamonds, cheap clothing, and shrimp. What these products have in common that they are likely were made by modern slaves. Approximate number of slaves today is about 20 to 30 million. According to U.S. State Department, 600,000 to 800,000 people are trafficked across international borders. Human trafficking is a huge global problem that involves different types of slavery. It requires a strong global efforts and strict domestic regulations. In this speech, I will review definitions of human trafficking, describe each type, and will describe how it being fought. Let's define what human trafficking is. United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime defines trafficking in persons as the recruitment, transportation, transfer, harboring, or receipt of a person by means of the threat or use of force or other forms of coercion, of abduction, of fraud, of deception, of abuse of power, or of payments or benefits to achieve consent of a person having control over another person for the purpose of exploitation. Physical movement doesn't have to occur necessarily. Individuals may be trafficking victims regardless of whether once they consented, participated in a crime as direct result of being trafficked, were transported into exploitative situation, or were simply born into a state of servitude. You've all heard of human trafficking of women and children for sex, but exploitation has many other types. Children are trafficked for begging, for forced labor, or sometimes as soldiers. Adults are trafficked for forced labor, domestic servitude, or harvesting organs. As you can see, modern slavery has many phases, and now I'll talk about each type in detail. The biggest part of human trafficking is sexual exploitation of women and children and men, which takes about 79% of all human trafficking. This kind of trafficking includes women used in the brothels, but they are used also outside of brothels. For example, in secluded areas such as mining or agricultural camps where workers are isolated for a prolonged period of time, and demand for such services is high. Sexually trafficked women, people, are often threatened and tortured, and they have very limited, if any, means to escape. Forced labor is the second biggest type of human trafficking. Domestic servitude happens when persons work in a private residence. A domestic worker is not free to leave her employment and is abused and underpaid if paid at all. Women and girls are also sexually abused in this domestic servitude. In some countries, children are often sold into domestic servitude. Bonded labor is the type of forced labor where people are tied to abusive workplace by some kind of debt. Forced labor is where employers exploit workers made more vulnerable by high rates of unemployment, poverty, crime, discrimination, corruption, political conflict, or even cultural acceptance of the practice. In the United States, foreign workers are often enter legally by paying high fees to recruiters that helping them to get visa. But although they promised good pay and better life here, they find themselves trapped in forced labor condition on construction sites or farms or restaurants or beauty salons. Worldwide, forced labor is even more widespread. People work in very harsh conditions, very long hours with minimal pay, maybe sometimes without a pay. For example, let's consider chocolate. The majority of cocoa product production comes from Africa, where children are often used to work. Many of those children are abducted from Mali, sometimes are sold by their extremely poor parents for as little as $30. Next, let's talk about human trafficking, how it's combated. Fighting human trafficking includes three P's, as they say: prevention, prosecution, and protection. As preventative measures, governments have the responsibility to enforce labor laws, treat workers fairly, including lawfully present and irregular migrants, and root out corruption. In addition, awareness campaigns, brochures, video, TV campaigns, and websites can all help to fight human trafficking. International collaboration is also a necessary measure. Governments also create the laws that allow prosecution of the traffickers and protection of the victims. Victims should not be treated as criminals. Instead, protective laws and regulations are put in place in many countries. Although government keep working on increasing their effort, people need to address the issue as well. Consumers are connected to human trafficking more closely than they can possibly imagine. Connected, however, indirectly. To the man in the Amazon compelled to mine for gold, and to the woman forced into prostitution in that mining camp, linked to the construction worker in the Gulf that who is unable to leave the exploitative situation, or to that West African cocoa fields kids that instead of school they are compelled to work. President Obama said every citizen can take action by speaking up and insisting that their clothes they wear and food they eat and the products they buy are made free of forced labor. Business and non-profit leaders can ensure their supply chains do not exploit individuals in bondage. Within our own country, we need to be able to identify trafficking situations. Traffickers often threaten their victims so they cannot accept help so easily. The U.S. Department State of State website has contains information on red flags and to look for, and the questions to ask in order to identify trafficking victims and report it. And in conclusion, human trafficking is a very big problem of our time. It manifests itself in many different ways, and it's very hard to combat. It is important to understand that human trafficking, what it is, and types of human trafficking, and how it can be fought. Human trafficking is a very large topic, and we can probably talk about it for days. And those products that I showed you in the beginning, they're just a little part of all the products and services that are created by slave labor. Thank you. Oh, and say good night. Good night.